Thanks for inviting me here to speak. Thanks for HashKey to set up this conference. It's been great to see some of the reception for proof of work and Bitcoin and all these things. We're seeing some really exciting traction on this side of the world compared to the West. So really refreshing to see. I almost feel like home here. I prepared a little bit of a blurb to set the context for this talk. I wanted to talk about the organic nature of blockchains and compare them to cities. So let me start with this little blurb and then we'll get into the talk, okay? So blockchains are cities. They are both social manifestations. They both grow through social connections and awareness. I'll now use cities and blockchains interchangeably to mean the same thing in my talk. Where opportunities exist, people just show up. Cars occupy streets. Local shops pop up to serve the people. You have to grow and nurture this and set lenient policies for these builders to build the cores, the downtowns, and the big skyscrapers and businesses to create wealth opportunities. The big developers will launch in multiple cities or chains. The brands grow globally. The entities are independent and operate uniquely within each of the cities or blockchains. You establish bridges between cities so people can travel between loved ones in other cities or even join endeavors in other chains with new opportunities. Some will settle down and call it home. I expect new blockchains or new cities to keep popping up, some to grow big and be recognized as the most safest to the users. In the physical world, democracy or policies will lead growth past the initial stage, while in blockchains, decentralization ends up taking over past the bootstrap stage. However, the physical world deteriorates, but the digital space does not. Bridges need to be kept to a higher standard to meet the best cities. Physical cities saturate and default on debts as economies have boom and bust cycles, while the blockchains can grow in perpetuity because no bust cycles due to over-leverage. Think of Bitcoin as a vault and all of these EVM chains as smart cities, all digital and no physical. In the physical world, you have passport control, and through centralization, some get through. However, in the digital, it has to be automated, and we have to get it right, and that's the challenge we're solving. Rollux is the best smart city to have the best bridges to other cities as sort of a travel hub. That's how we're designing it. Itself offering unique opportunities for wealth, prosperity, and through its superchain, layer 3s as sort of suburbs, but also innovation for the world to benefit in its own cities. Actually, the suburbs or fractal chains here are roll-ups that borrow policies and securities from the main cities. So there needs to be no trusted bridges. For Bitcoin, there'll likely be only one travel hub that everyone trusts. It's a first mover advantage, and I can confidently say to the world that we finally arrived. So the superchain concept with cities and suburbs, you have multiple suburbs spanning out almost like an organic specimen. Okay, so Syscoin was born around 2 or 3 years after Bitcoin. So Bitcoin 2009, Genesis block, Syscoin came around 2014. So we're about a 10-year-old project. We're quite old. The initial release was about 95% compatible with Bitcoin, but we actually were one of the first merge mine coins. Merge mining is actually really critical, and I'll get to why that's important. In 2015, we created smart contracts, the first on-chain smart contracts that were in public. Actually, we created on-chain identities, marketplaces, certificates, which are like NFTs, and we had a novel pruning algorithm to remove the data from the blockchain if the identity associated was not used. However, we found that to be insufficient. In 2016, we had the big block debate on Bitcoin Talk. We realized that blockchains are actually court systems, not transaction processors. That's important. Being a court system means you just adjudicate issues around the blockchain, but you don't actually push all the retail users to it. In 2018, we released Sentry nodes, and this increases something called the Nakamoto coefficient. So it increases the independent blockchain decentralization, and actually they're paid. And also 2018, we launched we looked at trusted execution environments. We found it inadequate as Intel was likely not to update their policies to accommodate decentralized trusted execution. So we left that alone and focused on decentralized smart contracts. In 2019, we studied the improvements of proof of stake and proof of work put together, but still retained the dominance of proof of work in the algorithm. The chain lock design was born as a way to lock the chain and retain some sort of proof of stake properties within proof of work. In 2021, we had a dual chain architecture we announced. So there was Bitcoin and then merged mining into a UTXO chain and then an EVM chain, which is secured all throughout. So we have sort of 3 chains, and all, the smart city concept is starting to be born here with the EVM. And we also found a way through multi-quorum chain locks to really create security through the Sentry nodes. This actually is a way for you to have a proof-of-stake property within the mechanism, but you still have proof-of-work as a dominant algorithm. Actually, what this does is create proof-of-stake within proof-of-work. It's really interesting because I think we're the first ones to figure that out. And a closer look, you can see that the longest chain rule and the anti-fragility of the system is still intact through proof of work. But after 5 blocks, it gets locked. And so you actually retain the security. What you're doing there is transferring the security from Bitcoin. In 2023, we independently from Ethereum research found that we needed to solve the data availability problem. The data availability problem is a critical problem to the roll-up space. When people are creating layer 2s and layer 3s, they all depend on data that's stored on the base blockchain, and you need to have an abundant data layer for the roll-ups to scale. So our data layer can support up to 10,000 transactions a second. We think, obviously not one data layer is going to solve them all. There's going to be crypto economic data layers also, but this one is enshrined and it's focused more on the Bitcoin philosophy. So when we mean by Bitcoin philosophy, we mean trusted, no trusted setup, quantum security, and hash-based. In 2023, Rollux was born. This is the topic of the conversation. So we're basically talking about an optimistic rollup that's going to convert to ZK. However, it's borrowing the principles of the security from Bitcoin and the data availability and the finality. So it's a really interesting, scalable design that's been live for about 8 months now. And so you can sort of see how things are sort of evolving here naturally over 10 years. All of these systems are working cohesively to solve one problem, and that's decentralized, a sort of a decentralized smart city environment where people can get involved and use the system in a safe, secure way without, without it blowing up and halting like some of the blockchains you're seeing today. Okay, so back to proof of work versus proof of stake. This is sort of the lion's share of the argument. Proof of work actually has been mathematically proven to be more decentralized and more permissionless. However, someone like Sriram would come back and say proof of stake is more secure. And that's true. Proof of stake offers more short-term honest behavior. However, anti-fragility and black swan prevention is critical. Like, we don't have enough black swan prevention in many of these blockchains. What I mean by that is when the Genesis block was born in Bitcoin, it was actually encoded that there needs to be something that is going to prevent black swans. And this is critical to Bitcoin. When AGI comes and there's a nuclear threat, obviously these black swans are going to happen in our lifetime. We need to have systems that are securing ourselves from that. And Bitcoin and proof of work is probably the best we're going to get. The proof of stake mechanism is not, we haven't proven it to be safe in the medium to long term, especially due to the anti-fragility and the fact that it's mathematically proven that it's more decentralized and permissionless. However, in our systems, like I was saying, we were able to encode proof of stake within proof of work. We actually promote the honest behavior in our system, yet still retain the decentralized properties of Bitcoin. So that's what Syscoin sort of solved at the base layer, and then Rollux builds on top with. And Rollux actually takes it a step further to do a little bit more, because now we're in the age of AI, so AI alignment and all these things matter. But if you don't have the core principles, the decentralized infrastructure in place, then none of it is going to come to fruit. So we need to focus on the most decentralized, most secure infrastructure possible for Bitcoin to come into play into these smart cities. And so when we're speaking about a lot of these things, we end up back to the light client argument, right? Even BitVM and the researchers can't agree what the security model of BitVM really is. However, there is a light client built into the BitVM solution. What I mean by that is if you're in a side chain like a layer 2 and you want to bring that Bitcoin back over, you have to prove in a light client that the Bitcoin was burnt. Just like the argument of cities, the policies of the cities can never be encoded with one another. They're going to have different cultures, different rules, and one city is never going to know the full rule set of the other city. Therefore, you're always going to need some sort of light client, right? So we start with the sidechain light clients, which is a general layer 2 that has no connection to Bitcoin, but maybe uses BitVM. That's the worst sort of security possible. It's pretty good, but it's not not ideal. And you have something like Citria or Babylon or some of these things that are building right into Bitcoin. They take the Bitcoin honest majority assumption. When people say we're secured with Bitcoin, it's not actually correct. You're actually secured through an honest majority principle. So for example, if you say we don't think the Bitcoin will roll back 10 blocks, and that's encoded in our BitVM machine, then that is saying that if Bitcoin rolls back more than 10, that Bitcoin actually could be stolen. So this is the honest majority principles when I mention this. And our solution, we were the first to figure out through merge mining and finality that we can have an additive solution. So not only can we take the honest majority of Bitcoin, we can also take the super honest majority of our sidechain security as well. So this is quite a big breakthrough, which means that something like BitVM is going to probably depend on us to solve the critical light client security to be used in these systems. So you can, graphically, you can start to see what it looks like today. You have the light clients that are watching the bridges, and you have like sidechain security. So it's not ideal, but we're getting better, right? And so you end up having the honest majority assumption, and what Vitalik is saying, it's a pretty critical problem. The more you dig into it, the more you realize that you're probably trusting a validator set or 51% somewhere. And so the state of the industry right now is a bunch of side chains. Probably you don't have finality. If you're building right into Bitcoin, you don't have finality, so you can't do DA, so you can't scale above and beyond maybe 100 transactions a second. However, for DA, you end up trusting another bridge, right? Something like what Nubit is doing, you're probably doing a POS on top of the side. And what our solution is, you have the green bridge, you have the finality, so you have the data availability, and you have Bitcoin honest majority plus sidechain honest majority, which is the best we think is possible in the industry. It's pushing the state of the art. So we think this is the best that we've got to today. This is 10-year plus research that's all coming together. And we have the ability for us to then build on top to do Rollux as a smart city. So you can start to see how it's getting pieced into place, that the non-trusted bridges as layer 2s and layer 3s through fractal scaling start to get built into Rollux. And then from there, obviously, as a travel hub, like I was saying, you'd probably want to start building bridges into other chains. So for example, if you're going to go from Bitcoin to Ethereum, you're probably most likely to go from this solution here, from Rollux, instead of going direct, because you get the extra security from the green bridge. And the other thing I wanted to mention here was the crypto economic security. The Bitcoin crypto economic security can actually solve a lot of problems. For example, if you have an eigen service that's backed with Bitcoin itself, then you can solve some critical problems. For example, in BitVM or BitVM 2, there's a proposal that the operators are static. The verifiers could be dynamic, but the operators are static. However, if you split the problem up, the verifiers and the operators are actually independent, and then the BitVM game is completely kept the same. What you can do is through crypto economic services like an AVS service, you can create a dynamic federation list, right? Through using crypto economic security of Bitcoin itself. So if you're able to create a permissionless, decentralized, dynamic federation list, then BitVM ends up being more secure. Of course, you still depend on the light client security, and you can't get away from that. So if there's any questions on any of this, we're in booth B06. We'd love to answer some of those builders, investors, or anyone that wants to get involved. We'd love to have you guys. So we're in B06, and come chat with us, even if you're building in the Bitcoin space or in and out of it. And we're also doing a giveaway here. So if you scan this QR code, everyone here in the audience gets some free sys. So you can convert that or keep it or be part of our story and journey. Thank you.